became bored by his mother telling old fables and created his own stories. His early education was at Brown School in West Side Chicago. When he was about 11, there was an epidemic of diphtheria, so his parents sent him to a private school. Mrs. Cooley's School for Girls. Fortunately, he was not the only boy that was sent there. His health improved when he was given a bike and spent many hours riding the streets of Chicago. His later education was at Harvard, where he excelled in Latin more so than he did in English. This was despite the fact that he would later describe both Greek and Latin as dreary. Two of the older brothers, George and Harry, worked at his father's business, the American Battery Company. But fumes from the batteries affected Harry's health, and he began to show early signs of consumption. Realising his sons needed fresh air, Ed's father, along with Lou Sweetser, purchased land in Cassie County, Idaho, to start a ranch that the boys named the Bar Y, a name that Ed would later use in his novel, Bandit Hell's Bend. In 1890, Ed's father sent him to join his brothers in Idaho, where his love of horses came to the fore and would last throughout his life. The following year, Ed's father decided he had given his son enough time to get his carefree days out of his system and summoned his return to resume schooling. He was sent to the Phillips Academy in Massachusetts. However, his stay was to be a short one, as Ed's lack of interest for his classes came to the attention of his principal, who wrote to his father shortly after the new term began, insisting that he removed his son immediately. Having no intention that his son should escape his education and aware Ed was in much need of discipline, George Burroughs sent his son to the Michigan Military Academy, located near Orchard Lake, Michigan. The school's principal curriculum was infantry, artillery, and cavalry. The first few months were an unhappy time for him, and he often complained of illness to escape his duties and the hardship of discipline and obedience. But towards the end of 1892, he had channeled his energy into sport, particularly American football, that finally led him to take more interest in his studies. During his time at the academy, Ed and another cadet, Charles Campbell, devised a prank to break the monotonous winter months, and arranged an altercation that would lead to them having a fake duel. The two boys with their seconds were on their way to the nearby lake, followed by half the school, passing many who had climbed trees to get a better view. But before it could take place, the commandant heard about it and ordered their arrest. Fortunately, the two boys were able to convince their superior officer that it was all a joke by showing the blank cartridges and a handkerchief stained in red ink. Apart from receiving a reprimand, the superior officer thought it was the best joke he had ever heard and laughed just as much as anybody else. Upon graduating in 1895, Ed attempted to enroll in the US Military Academy at West Point in New York, but failed the entrance exam. After spending a further year at the MMA, Ed was able to join the US 7th Cavalry stationed at Fort Grant in Arizona. Yep, that's the same cavalry that 20 years earlier was once led by George Armstrong Custer, who along with this troop, were cut down by the Sioux, the Cheyenne and the Arapaho at the Little Bighorn River in 1876. In the desert, there was little for the men to do apart from drills, roadwork and digging ditches. Ed contracted dysentery after storms contaminated the water, and he was confined to hospital, where he was treated by two doctors who were often the worse for drink, which is hardly surprising given all the water was being contaminated. His escape from hospital came when he heard that a renegade outlaw called the Apache Kid had killed a man and his daughter and burnt their wagon. Lying that his health had improved, he joined B Troop to apprehend the killer. They were given 3 days' rations, but after scouring the countryside and rugged peaks, they returned late, empty-handed, and somehow lost their wagon. By the end of March 1897, Ed was given a medical discharge. His military career was over. For a brief time, he rejoined his brother who had been assigned to load cattle on a train in Arizona and taken to Kansas City. Every now and again, a steer would fall over, and Ed was sent into the swaying car to get it back on its feet. Now, if you've ever seen the 1958 film film Cowboy, starring Jack Lemmon and Glenn Ford, there was a scene in this film that depicted exactly what Ed had to do and shows actually how dangerous that had been. Because Jack Lemmon had to go into that car, was trying to lift the steering back onto his feet. Following this misadventure, Ed applied and failed to join Roosevelt's Rough Riders in the war between America and Spain. Annie Oakley also applied with an army of 100 women sharpshooters that was also turned down. So he bought a stationery store in Pocatello, Idaho, with money loaned to him by his brother Harry. After several months and realising that he was not cut out to be a retail merchant, Ed sold the store back to the original owner. In the summer of 1899, Ed went on a trip to New York with two friends. On their return journey, they stopped off at Toronto, where he was involved in a fight in a bar, and he was struck on the head by a policeman's baton. For years afterwards, he would suffer headaches, dizziness, and strange hallucinations, the last of which he used as a story device when he began writing the novel Pirates of Venus. In January 1900, Ed married his sweetheart, Emma Hulbert. Together they would have 3 children, Joanne, Hulbert and John Coleman. For the first 3 years of their marriage, Ed worked at his father's company until they decided to join his brother's dredging for gold in the Snake River in Idaho. After 4 years and living in 2 houseboats, there just wasn't enough gold coming in to keep it going. It was during this period that Ed wrote his first story, Minidoka, a fairy tale that was eventually published in 1998. For a short time, he took a job as a railway policeman for the Oregon Short Line Railway. He resigned after a few months and the couple returned to Chicago. Over the next 7 years, and times of absolute poverty, Ed held a variety of jobs, including working as a timekeeper on a 17-story building under construction that involved him walking along the girders at height. After seeing a man fall to his death, he left the position shortly afterwards. The most successful job he had ever had was a year spent at Sears Roebuck, where he had a managerial position and a consistent salary. But his itchy feet got in the way and he left without any good cause. Next, Ed started an agency to sell lead pencil sharpeners. And while he waited for sales that never came in, he began writing his first Martian tale, giving it the title, My First Adventure on Mars. With his agency failing, Ed then went to work for his brother Frank, who owned a company that manufactured stationery. During this period, Ed continued writing the story on the back of the letter-headed paper, and he reached a stage that he considered was about halfway. It consisted of 180 pages, 12 chapters, and 43,000 words in length, and sent it off to the All Story magazine to get some feedback. The editor was impressed by what he wrote and urged him to complete the story, which Burroughs duly obliged. Upon submitting the final manuscript, Ed was given a cheque for $400, which was equivalent to about $13,500 in today's money. Following a suggestion from Metcalfe, he began writing his second novel set in medieval England, much along the lines of Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, which would eventually become The Outlaw Torn. However, it was not received well and was asked to do several edits. So in the meantime, Ed started to write another novel called Tarzan and the Apes. But going back to The Outlaw Torn, Burroughs wrote the story between November the 5th and November the 23rd in 1912. That's just 18 days, submitting his first draft of the story to All Story on the 29th. As a handwritten manuscript. While he waited for a reply, he began writing Tarzan and the Apes. And as we know, Tarzan is also known as Lord Greystoke, a title that he inherited from his father. But originally, Burroughs used the name Bloomstoke, but decided the name wasn't grand enough and crossed it out and inserted the name Greystoke. But because the two manuscripts were written so close to one another, and the Outlaw Torn, and that had further changes to its manuscript, it is unknown which story used the name Greystoke first. With the success of his first story, From that point on, Burroughs embarked upon a writing career with his imagination knowing no bounds. He wrote stories on other worlds like the Moon and Venus and even beyond the farthest star. He sent protagonists to the Earth's core, to islands inhabited by savages, dinosaurs and monsters of creation, from tales of ancient Rome to the brawling streets of Chicago. In late 1941, when he stayed at a hotel in Honolulu, Ed and his son Hully had planned to have a game of tennis, but they woke to the sounds of firing. They went outside and saw explosions and black smoke billowing into the air over Pearl Harbor. They could see an attack was occurring, but not being able to do much about it, they played their game of tennis anyway. Ed applied and was accepted as war correspondent, the oldest in the US during World War II. He was given a second stint as war correspondent, this time with the US Navy. And part of the mission was to fly into Spain in a plane from Guam, piloted by actor Tyrone Power. Upon his return, Ed suffered a series of angina attacks and was confined to bed for a month. Health issues plagued Ed during the final years, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1949. During his lifetime, he had written roughly 80 novels and numerous short stories. On Sunday morning, March 19, 1950, Ed was said to be sat in his bed having breakfast and reading the funny pages when he suffered a fatal heart attack and he passed away at the age of 74. So, there you go. I'm sorry that was too dry, but that was we're here to celebrate Ed's life, and that was Now, we're going to take a little break from our normal schedule, because I'm going to ask Paul and Sue if you can do this. As you know, this is a British ERB Society event. And so just for a moment, we're going to go over to the dark side and become a Burroughs Bibliophiles event. The Bibliophiles were formed in 1960, and almost from the beginning, they awarded actors, artists, and writers with the Golden Lion Award. In the mid-1980s, when George Burroughs was coming to the fore, and would eventually take over the Bibliophiles, he began to award fans for their contribution to keeping the Burroughs name alive. The award reads, for outstanding achievement and distinguished service to the memory of the ERB, it goes to Rod Jackson. Rod.
Yes.
Come on.